Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for popping in to sit here and listen in as myself and my co host, Andy, bring to you another episode of CoachesCorner.health. I am Leslie. I am your self care specialist. I work with female entrepreneurs who have strong CEO skills but need to add more self care into their life and business to support them emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Over to you, Andy.
Great introduction. I love your introduction every
Oh,
time, and I love how it
thank
changes
you.
and evolves as you grow and change.
Yes.
Hello, everybody. I'm Andy. I'm the unconditional coach. I help people with boundaries, control issues, and really just to build better relationships in their lives, whether that be their partner, their intimate relationship, their romantic relationship, or whether that be their friends, family, coworkers, other kinds of relationships. I help people get what they want from their lives, from themselves, and from their relationships. Welcome to our episode today, to our show today. Today, we got a good one for you. Today, we're talking about respect. Today, we're talking about what it's like to be respected. And we're going to dig into, again, our series we've been doing, whether you're having a problem or whether this is a symptom of a deeper problem when you are not feeling respected. The title, of course, is They Don't Respect Me, or I'm not being respected. But how do you know that? Like, how do we know if that's the problem? How do we know if that's the symptom of a deeper problem? But let's start at the very beginning. How do you even know if you're being respected or not? What does respect even mean? I think too many of us don't take the time to define specifically what respect means. So why don't we start with that? Leslie, why don't you tell me what you think respect means?
Yeah, sure, for sure. So, first of all, thank you very much about the introduction. Yes, I realized I do have an umbrella. So, I am a self care specialist, and it is about mindset, emotional awareness, but also self love. And so, I thought, well, that really falls under an umbrella, which is self care. So,
Yeah,
hence the name change. But yes, it's
beautiful.
all the same thing. Um, Respect, yeah, it has such a I believe it can really have that umbrella effect as well. Where are you looking at from terms of like where you're looking for respect from? Because respect in a relationship is going to look different than respect in a friendship, which is going to look different respect in the office space,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So what
yeah.
is that respect? To me, that's like the different aspects of what respect could mean to people. So, for example, let's look at it. We always talk relationships, and we're probably going to dig into that a little bit more. But let's talk about in the workplace, feeling respected. That means maybe you want to feel valued in what you bring to the table, your gifts, your skills, your ideas, and you want to feel that when you are presenting, whether it's a new idea, whether it's presenting your opinions or your input around something that's going on, you want to feel respected by your peers, that they're listening to you, that they're taking what you have to say and absorbing it and thinking about it. And I think that's where I would look at it from that respect point of view in the workplace. And again, like, it's all different. I think it's different in every type of relationship. So that's my idea of what respect would be, just in one
Right,
area.
right. And I agree that there is different versions of disrespect, different versions of respect in different areas, depending on what kind of relationship you're talking about at this moment. Because feeling respected at work feels different than feeling respected in my relationship,
Hmm.
in my marriage, or whatever. Um, the the way I define it is, for me, and again, one of the things that I'm trying to get to here is that respect is a very individualized concept. Um, for me, respect feels like I want to have the freedom and space to express my emotions however they come up.
Mm.
Right? Whether that be at work, whether that be in my relationships, whether that be in my friendships, or in my family. I want I want to be able to express my emotions no matter what they are and however they come up. I've been in several situations with friends, family, at work, and in my personal relationship where I didn't have that freedom, where I was not allowed to express certain emotions. And in many relationships, there are certain conditions that one partner or the other will put down, especially around emotions and around communication. For example, a common one is you're not allowed to raise your voice around me, or I don't want to hear your anger is a common one.
Mm-hmm.
Usually because somebody's triggered around, raised voices or anger. Um, so I want the freedom. I feel respected when I have the freedom and space to express my emotions. Um, Yet I was talking to somebody the other day, and she said feeling respected to her feels like having the ability to express her thoughts and experiences, which are different than emotions. She wants to be able to tell a story or say what she thinks and not have to be told how she's allowed to communicate, which is different, right? Because when she said that, I recognized that sometimes I have less patience for listening to people's stories, right? Just as some people have less patience for listening to me when I'm angry or raise my voice. So respect looks different to different people. And if we don't define it, if we don't specifically and expressly define it, then we can't tell if we can't tell somebody else how they're respecting me or disrespecting me
Mm-hmm.
if I don't have a definition of it. So I wanted to start there. Further thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because, hello, I'm going to use myself as an example. As we've talked about in all of our episodes, pretty much, I have been married a long time, and so this is something for me. Respect is it really kind of is similar to what someone had said to you. I want to be able to express how I'm thinking, or how express it in my words, and not
Right.
feel like I can't express it, whether you're impatient to hear the length of my expression, the length of my story, but it's how I maybe move through and understand what, so that I understand what I'm saying, so that I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I'm at least articulating what I really mean. And I think I've had to learn how to articulate myself in a way that it comes across in my relationship, to say that this to me feels respectful when you listen to how I'm feeling, by allowing me to express it how I express it, my
Right.
thoughts and feelings, but also not on the other end, like you were saying, maybe not feeling the party doesn't feel that they want to give you that amount of time to express what you're thinking. Like they're basically saying, get to the point already.
Right.
And so that can feel like a level of disrespect. On the flip side, listening to my partner having to say whatever he's feeling or what he's trying to tell me, I sometimes have felt disrespected in the word choice, right?
Right.
The choice of words that are used. And so to me, disrespect is uh, when a person might say something and I'll say, you can't speak to me that way because I don't
Right.
feel respected. So um, over the years we've evolved, and
Right.
especially these past 6 years of me getting into self-development, and now it's bleeding into my relationship in such a positive way. We're recognizing how to move through these conversations and allowing each other's way of expressing our opinions, our thoughts, our feelings, whether it's from the emotional space, whether it's not, whether, we've just learned how to do that. But again, that takes dedication and commitment to one another to be able to do that. If you don't have that level of commitment from your partner, that's where you might start butting heads. And I think that's where the level of disrespect, the feeling of being disrespected might seem even more heightened, because maybe you don't have that level of commitment from one to the other about what they're willing to give to the relationship when it comes to respect.
Right. And I think that's a great segue into the conversation of whether or not this is a problem or a symptom.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what you and I have both expressed is the main way we feel respected is be able to express the thing we want to express. For me, it's my emotions. For you, it's your thoughts, and you want to be able to get them out, even if it takes you a while, and you're telling the story and all that. Which, by the way, that is a significant difference in how we want to be respected. But you
Mm-hmm.
also said if he uses certain words or somebody else uses certain words, you'll feel disrespected. So that's a good way to dig into whether or not this is a problem or a symptom. If you're feeling disrespected, it's not the same thing as not feeling respected, because feeling respected is the freedom to express myself. So if you don't give me the freedom to express myself, then I don't feel respected. But feeling disrespected is not about my freedom to express. It's about your freedom to express, right? If for example, I were to use certain words in talking with you, you would feel disrespected, but you might still feel respected if I stopped and listened to what you had to say. But
Correct.
so you could feel disrespected and respected in the same conversation. And so that's where we get into this idea of a problem or a symptom. Is it coming from that person, or is it coming from within ourselves? Is it something they're doing or not doing, or is it something that I'm doing or not doing? Is it something that I can express as something I can change, or is it something that I need you to change, right? And that's where the problem or symptom comes in, because if the problem is simply I'm not being respected, then maybe they're not letting me speak. They're not giving me the space and freedom to express whatever it is I'm trying to express.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm feeling disrespected, maybe it's because what they're saying is seeming harmful to me,
Mm-hmm.
you know, directly or indirectly harmful to me, derogatory, insulting, hurtful in some kind of a way. And that would feel more disrespect than a lack of respect. And there's a distinctive difference there,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. And I think too, it really does come down to, again, the level of commitment, especially if it's in a romantic relationship, of each party to be able to recognize that we communicate differently. We might be trying to say the same things, but we're communicating it differently. And how we express ourselves could be from the feelings point of view or from the thoughts and the thoughts point of view. And but again, being able to have those conversations to actually start really digging in and understanding your partner. This is how they communicate. It takes work. That's why when you hear people say relationships take work, is because they do, because it takes dedication and commitment to the relationship to be able to say, okay, this is who you are. Let me get to know you a little bit more so I can understand that. So I'm not coming from that wounded place too, believing that you're disrespecting me, when actually it could just be your way of communicating what you're trying to communicate. But a lot of the time, like you were saying, most people will flip out because they believe if someone is talking to them a certain way, or saying specific words that maybe they don't want to hear or they don't like to hear, but that person's just trying to express how they feel, they'll take it more to they'll take it as a direct attack rather than allowing themselves to get to the root of the reason why this person is saying or expressing what they're expressing. And it can be, again, you said, is it a problem, or is it a symptom of something deeper than
Mm-hmm.
that?
Yeah. And the answer to that is a simple question. You can ask that person, did you use this word? Are you speaking this way? What you're saying intended to be harmful? Or is this or is there a deeper thought you're trying to express? And if they're aware, which that's its own work, is becoming self-aware of our own intentions, they might be able to tell you where it's actually coming from. And it could be coming from some deep trauma. It could be coming from some deep pain, some hurt from their past, from yesterday or from when they were 3 years old. You know, it could be coming from any kinds of places. And in which case, what they're trying to communicate is something that is deeply rooted and may not actually be rooted in the direct conversation you're having. Mm-hmm. In which case, it's a symptom of something deeper. And they could be just trying to communicate a surface thought that is triggering something in you from your past, mm-hmm. from an hour ago or yesterday or from when you were 3 years old. Mm-hmm. Right? Or somewhere in between. It could be triggering something in you. They could be actually trying to say something that is, you know, in their mind respectful, but in your mind disrespectful because of how you receive it. Mm-hmm. And at that point, whose responsibility is it to change it? You know, at that point, it's still a symptom, but now it's the symptom of yours, not a symptom of theirs. And whose responsibility is it to fix that? Whose responsibility is it to change that? And how do you do so? My suggestion would be to, in the same conversation, in the same way that I just mentioned a minute ago, ask them what their intention was and be open to their answer. Because if their intention was meant to be harmful, then maybe this is the end of the conversation. You know, maybe there's a different way to approach this subject, or maybe it's just not a subject that's worth approaching at all, depending on the level of your relationship. And as you mentioned, the level of commitment of either side, you or them, to both the relationship and this particular conversation. Mm-hmm. I know many couples have certain conversations they just won't approach together. You know, I will not talk to you about your ex-wife or your ex-husband. Mm-hmm. All right. Right. We're not going to express feelings about that. Okay, fine. You know, so it really does come down to your commitment to the conversation and to the relationship, and they could be separate. So yeah, those kinds of questions. But at the same time, is it deeper, or is that just the problem? Are they actually directly trying to be harmful? Are they directly trying to, like, are they actually not respecting you? You know, when we cut each other off, and you and I've done this on occasion, talk over each other. I don't think for us it comes from a place of disrespect or lack of respect. I think for us it comes from almost wait a minute, I have a thought, I need to get that out. Mm-hmm. Which might seem like disrespect to the audience members, but you and I have had established such a relationship that we don't feel or express that kind of feelings. Like, we do still feel respected, because as you can tell, the vast majority of the time we do have the space to listen to each other express our feelings and thoughts. So that's where I'm coming from. It is really, if it's coming from something deeper on either end of the conversation, it's a symptom of something deeper. But if it could be actually somebody not having respect for the other party or intentionally disrespecting the other party, it could be that too. And how do you know? But besides the question.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things too I wanted to talk about was that sometimes we forget that communication isn't easy. Communicating within relationships is not easy. And if you're trying to find the right words to express how you feel, sometimes you just cannot find them. And so it can come across as being disrespectful. And it could be probably further from the truth from what you're trying to,
exactly.
What you're not trying to be disrespectful, but it comes across that way. Again, this is learning to communicate. It's something that, of course, we learn. We grow up, we're taught how to speak, we go to school, we're taught a lot of things, but there's that one little, I think, piece of the puzzle that we have to learn on our own. And that is how to communicate with each other in a way that we can create bonds with people. You know, you have your like besties, right? You've just found a way to like create that bond. You found a way to speak each other's language. It's the same thing in relationships that are romantic. It's finding that way to speak each other's language, not necessarily love language, but speak the language that in a way like you're speaking your truth, but so that the other person gets you, they understand what it is that you're trying to say. It's not easy though.
Right.
It takes work. Some people I know have been married for decades still don't get it. They're still having communication issues. And so it comes down to a lot of the time where they think it's a problem of being disrespected when it's really something deeper. And again, don't forget, as a person who's watching this today, you have, if you're in a relationship, whether it's a friendship, whether you have like really good relationship with your peers at work, or whether you're in a romantic relationship, it still is going, you still have your past and they have theirs, meaning they have their experiences and their experiences around being respected or feeling disrespected, and you have the same, and then you bring it into the same space. And if you don't talk about it, at least, especially if you get into that feeling of, well, I'm being disrespected right now, or I'm feeling disrespected right now, or vice versa, if you don't talk about it, how are you going to mend it? I don't know if there's responsibility on just one side. I truly
Right.
believe because there are two people involved, or however many people are involved in the conversation, that everyone is equally I guess responsible for learning how to communicate
Right.
what they're thinking in a way that makes sense and is respectful to someone else, just the way that like they would want it to them to be communicated. So that's my thoughts on. I don't believe that it's just one side is
Yeah.
responsible. It's too much pressure, and it's not really fair to put the onus on just one party when there's two sides to every story. You've heard that saying, there's two sides to every story, and then there's the truth,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah. And I completely agree. All of us are responsible for respecting the conversation. And this is where the difference between respect and disrespect comes from. Respect is when we feel, whatever the feeling is we're intending to, whatever the thing we're trying to do gets across. And disrespect is when we feel communicated to in such a way that we don't feel that our values are being um, are being valued at all. And and this is even more true in a working relationship, in the office, or
mhm,
in professional relationships, because oftentimes in a professional relationship the commitment isn't to the relationship, it's to the paycheck or to the passion project or to the job. It's commitment to the career. It's not necessarily commitment to the person sitting in the desk next to me or
mhm,
sitting in the office down the hall, right? It's not necessarily a commitment to that person. So in other kinds of relationships, not just romantic relationships, it still comes down to what is your commitment to that person and to the relationship. If you're committed to your job but you don't actually care about the people you work with, then you're not going to put in a lot of time and effort to create positive relationships with those people you work with,
mhm,
right? You're not going to put a lot of time and effort into respecting them or being respected by them if you like your job but you don't really like the people you work with. And so it comes down to the commitment to the relationship and to the commitment to yourself. um, and again, it's is it the problem or is it a symptom? It comes down to, are you willing to find out if there's something deeper going on either within yourself or within the person you're communicating with? You don't have to fix it. I'm not suggesting that if you talk to your coworker and they don't know that they're being harmful to you, and you can't get through to them that they are being harmful to you, it's not your job to create self-awareness in them. It's called self-awareness because they have to create it. It's not your job as their coworker to bring awareness to them as to how they treat people. And even if you're the boss or employer, it's still not directly your responsibility. You can point out that people are feeling disrespected, but you don't get to insist that they become aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
You do get to decide if you want that person to still be working for you, um, based on their level of awareness. But you don't get to decide for them whether or not they become aware. So even in friendships, in family, in working relationships, as well as romantic relationships, it really does come down to, as you mentioned, the commitment to the relationship. Um, because we have different levels, different kinds, different reasons to be committed to different relationships.
Mm-hmm.
When most of us, when we get married intended for life. So the intention there is to be committed forever. Um, Now, some of us change our minds, or some of us have different views on that, but that's not really the point I'm getting at here. The point is, when I get a job, I don't have the same level of commitment to that person than I do when I walk down the aisle with them, right?
Right.
And that's it's that is those levels of commitment can help you determine how much work and how much effort you're willing to put in to that relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know,
And it's funny that you say that about work relationships, because I think also a lot of the time when we're in relationships like that, a lot of the words that come across, we take them extremely personally and forget that it's not necessarily about you. In
mm,
fact, if someone is saying something to you about some work that you've done, you've finished, and maybe there's some gaps that need to be filled in, a lot of people will take that as being a personal attack on them. And so
mhm,
they feel disrespected and they can't separate themselves from the actual task. It's really not about them. So
right,
when someone in the work, especially in a work environment, will say, it, I like what this looks like, or this needs to be filled in a little bit more. There's some gaps here. It's not a personal attack on you as a person, like how good you are, how capable you are. It's, let's see how we can, round this out, or fill the gaps in for this particular thing,
mhm,
which has nothing to do with you as a person. It has to do with the job at hand. And I
yeah,
think I learned that years ago. I mean, I was very sensitive when I would get feedback, but I understood after being in law for a few years, and a lawyer, saying to me, you need to develop a thick skin. And this was because I was working in real estate, residential, both sides of the coin, meaning realtors on both sides, lenders, and attorneys and all that in the mix. And you've got all these different personalities, and people would be coming at you with saying different things. And learning to have a thicker skin, to me, as I took a look back through time, after going through my journey of self-development, I recognized that it was about the task at hand, and the it wasn't about me as a person. It wasn't about me being capable of doing something. It was about, let's look at this particular thing and work on it
yeah,
together. Sorry for the noise. My husband's going to the gym, so he's driving out. But yeah, so that's what it was. And I recognized that, oh, that's what it was. You were telling me about the thing, not
yeah,
about Leslie, but about the thing. And I think a lot of people skip over that. They automatically attach it to their self-worth. And
yeah,
that's where a lot of disrespectful, or feelings of being disrespected, I think, are coming from, especially in the workplace. What do you think?
yeah, yeah. I completely agree, and I'm going to add, it comes from the other side too.
Mm-hmm.
Often when we're talking to somebody, we aren't putting as much effort into being respectful to them in the workplace,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Sometimes we might say mean things, or care less about how what we say comes across. Maybe I'm talking to somebody and I'm suggesting, that they can improve this, or maybe there's a gap there, or maybe here's some ways you can improve it. And maybe at home with my wife or my husband, I might be much more careful about what I say and how I say it. But at work, I don't I don't want to put that much effort in. I don't care about you as much as I care about my wife or my husband. So I don't want to put as much effort into being respectful. It's hard, and it's just not worth it to me. So sometimes we are actually less respectful to the people we work with.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we have deeper wounds that are related to work instead of deeper wounds that are related to relationships or family.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, we might feel less of a desire to respect people around a work environment. Sometimes we might feel um, more easily disrespected at work. Our feelings, we might take things a little more personally at work. And again, is that because of something from your experience, or is that something from their experience? Or are you or them directly not caring about the respect? Like, is it something that you just care less about that respect? So is it the problem, or is it a symptom of something deeper? And in work relationships, as you mentioned, it's often easier to just brush those things off and let them keep happening because we're not so interested in repairing or maintaining those relationships. After all, quitting a job and getting a new job is a lot easier than getting a divorce and remarrying, right? Um, I'd rather I'd rather get a new job than a new wife. I'd rather keep the one I have as far as wife is concerned, right? That's how most of us look at our relationships. So um, it does come down to how committed are you, like how much work are you willing to put in. And there is no judgment from you or me that I can tell as to what your decision there is. If you're not really committed to that relationship or that person, it's okay. You don't have to be committed. Even in a marriage, you don't have to be committed to respecting them and loving them. You can I know plenty of people who are happy in their relationships where they don't have a lot of respect for each other. But that's okay because respect isn't the thing they're looking for in that relationship. So there isn't any judgment that you should or have to do things a certain way. It's what do you each agree on that you want from this relationship. If there's conflict, then there's a difference in what's being offered and what's being wanted, right? And oftentimes that's related to respect.
Yeah, and you actually just reminded me of something. It's through an interaction that you had with somebody. I don't need to name her name, but it was a coach. I remember you had interviewed her, and her dynamic of her relationship was one way in the very beginning, and then
Mm-hmm.
she wanted change.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's the other part to that, which I wanted to add, because if you go into a relationship and you're completely fine with the way it is today, but now 10 years in, 20 years in, you've decided to do self development like I did. I was 22 years married, 21 years married, I should say, and or 22, I guess you say, yeah, 22. And I was doing self development, and I was the one changing. It was just me doing it. So what if now I'm 6 years later? What if my husband had never really been influenced by just the changes within myself? Like I then have to decide, well, is this the relationship that I want to continue to grow because I'm a different person? And so there's also that piece to it, because I think a lot of people then are like, okay, well, why I want them to change. And again, like you were saying, it's not about fixing the other person. It's self-care is really about yourself. So
Yeah.
you don't have the choice to have someone else do a self-care journey unless
Right.
they want to do it. They have to want it for themselves, because that's hence the word self-care. And I think obviously for me being a self-care specialist, I truly believe that self-care is probably the number one thing that has helped me exponentially in my life and with my relationship. But that's just myself, and I'd never force that upon anyone, but I truly believe it's very beneficial to look at it.
Yeah.
But I think also in relationships, looking at it from, okay, if you're in a relationship now and then things start to change because you're doing the work, but they're not, is you might get frustrated because you're gonna have done the work, and you're gonna be approaching the relationship from a different way, and you're gonna be where I want to just you're gonna be saying your words, you're gonna be expressing your feelings and a different way than you used to. And you're gonna maybe become frustrated because the other person is still the same that they are. So the question comes down to, are you willing to be in that relationship and nurture it and hope and be okay with where it's at right now, be okay with the relationship that you have right now because you've done the work on yourself, and maybe they'll change or maybe they won't, because I
Right.
think that can be really super scary to answer that question, right?
Can be, yeah.
Especially if you've been in a relationship for decades.
Yeah.
I think it would be really scary to be alone after spending so much a big chunk of your life with someone. You've changed and they're still the same, and you don't know whether or not they will. And that's just the gamble you take, because they're an individual just like you are. So
Right.
I just wanted to like remind people that it's not just about, people who are in a relationship who've already decided, that we have this level of commitment. Let's work on how we communicate. It's not just about that, because sometimes there will come those relationships where one side is doing the work and the other isn't. And I know you've worked with a lot of people like that
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
are still.
Yeah, and that's the exact point. And just to bring to light something else you've mentioned before too is, not only were you sometimes getting frustrated with him, but he sometimes also got frustrated with you because now you're a different person. Your
Mm-hmm,
responses to him were different, and he's like, "Well, what do I do now?" Right now, he's
mm-hmm,
forced to change. He's forced to evolve when that wasn't necessarily what he signed up for.
mm-hmm,
So, and again, these are, like you're saying, these are things that we have to bring up, that we get to bring up when we're in our relationships. Happens the same thing in a job. What happens if one person you've been working with for 5 or 10 or 20 years gets a promotion, and you're still working with them, but now they're in a different position, right? Or they get a lateral, change where they're still in the same authority position, but they're doing a different job now, right? So
mm-hmm,
our relationships evolve and change. Our values evolve and change. What we want from this relationship evolves and changes. And so, therefore, what respect means is also sometimes going to evolve and change. And how do you even know
mm-hmm,
what that looks like? These, this is another level as to why relationships are always work, not just work for 20 or 25 years, but always work. 30,
mm-hmm,
40, 50, 60 years down the road, they're still work, because what happens if what I want when I'm 70 is different than what I wanted when I was 18,
mm-hmm.
right? Likely it's going to be.
Yes, absolutely.
Uh, so our values change. What respect means changes, and how I feel disrespected will also change. So having those conversations on a continual basis, they don't have to be daily, but they do have to be on a continual basis. There is never a point where we've talked about this before and you know better. Every day that conversation can change. And I'm not suggesting you have to have the conversation new every day, although I would suggest that until you both of you come to an agreement as to, I'm feeling respected on both sides now, you should have it pretty often,
Mm-hmm.
even daily. But once you get to that place where you're feeling respected most of the time, then you don't have to keep having that conversation on a daily basis, but you will still want to have it on a continual basis, whatever that means to you, weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever that means to you. But have it, but make sure that each of you has the space to evolve and change. Each of you has the space to be who you are. And one of the reasons why I call myself the unconditional coach is that question you asked near the end. Am I willing to be here even if they don't change?
Mm-hmm.
Can you love them, respect them, treat them the way you want to treat them, even if they stay the same person that isn't very aware, isn't growing, isn't changing, isn't getting a new job, isn't getting a job? Like, are you willing to stay? Because if you're not, then you're not committed to the relationship enough to support them no matter what. I call myself the unconditional coach because I want to ask people, are you willing to love unconditionally? Are you willing to respect unconditionally? Are you willing to accept unconditionally? There's no judgment if you're not. Just don't act like you are if you're actually not. Don't act like I'm committed to this for life, but there's certain things they can do to ruin it. Well, that's not unconditional commitment then, is it? That's not a commitment. That's a request. That's a desire. I'd like to be in this relationship unless, right? And most of us have an unless point. There's a certain activities we won't tolerate. And that's not a bad thing. Just don't call yourself committed to the relationship if there are conditions that can break it. Right? Understand the difference. Because there is a level of commitment that comes with conditions. But it's a different level of commitment that comes with no conditions. Right? So understand what kind of commitment you're willing to offer. Understand what it is you're willing to give that person. And also understand that if you're putting conditions on it, they're also going to be putting conditions on it. And maybe you're not going to like their conditions. They're not going to like your conditions. And that's where a lot of the disrespect or lack of respect can come from. Right? This is where a lot of those problems can come from. Because the problem is I'm not willing to tolerate certain activities or certain phrasing or certain words or whatever. I'm not willing to tolerate certain things. Therefore, I'm not actually as committed to the relationship as maybe I thought I was. And it goes the same in family, work. You know, one of the most common conversations I have with clients is, why do you still talk to your brother, your mother, your aunt, your uncle, your cousin when they treat you this way? If every time we get on a call, you're complaining about how this person treats you, why haven't you done something to change the level of relationship? Like, why haven't you done something to honor yourself? Now, that doesn't mean you have to break the relationship. It does mean you have to do something. And I usually have an entire, list of options of what they can do to either improve the relationship or remove the relationship or lessen the relationship. So it happens in all kinds of relationships. How committed are you? Oftentimes we're more committed than we want to be, especially with family. We might be committed to our siblings because they're family and I believe in family. Great. Are you going to tolerate being treated like crap because you believe in family? You won't tolerate your husband or your wife treating you like crap, but you chose and married them. But you will tolerate your family treating you like crap and you didn't choose them? Like, what's the difference? Ask yourself those kinds of questions, right? So sometimes respect or disrespect is actually the problem. And sometimes it's a symptom of something deeper, as we talked about earlier in this conversation.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because, again, it just comes down to communication. I know for me, when it comes to family, I think even though that, like there's family can right, get right under your skin. And yet you're willing to put up with so much more things that they'll do that you would never allow your significant other to do at all. You won't give them that level of grace, if you
Right.
will. And yet your family can do that. I think it's still, when it comes to when you are choosing to decide to stay within any type of relationship or lessen the activity as far as how much time you spend with someone, it doesn't mean, like you were saying, that you have to cut them out of your life. It's really just about communicating what you need, but not communicating it in a way that you're attacking the other person where they feel that they have to be defensive, because that won't get you anywhere. It's like when a parent will tell their children, don't go out. I don't want you dating that girl. I don't want you dating that boy. Or I don't want you hanging around with those people. What all that is doing is enforcing to that child that you can't tell me what to do and I'm going to do what I want. And they're going to continue in those relationships. How do I know this? Because I've done it multiple times. So again, that's just because we don't like to be told what to do, right?
Yes.
It's again, you brought the key word, I think a lot of people don't recognize as being something that is valuable to creating, change or creating like this unity in a relationship, and that is agreement. If
Yeah.
you both are in agreement that this is how you want the relationship to be, then you both will show up and do the necessary things to keep that agreement because you
Yeah.
both chose it. If one says, I'm going to do it, and you're not doing it, and they're constantly berating the other for not doing it, all that does is just they start putting up a wall and it keeps getting higher and higher. And you'll find
Yes.
that the gap is becoming wider and wider and they become distant because
Yeah.
they're immediately going to put up they're going to feel defensive. So again, it's if you want to feel respected, I think one of the things, if you want to feel respected when someone speaks to you, imagine how your words come across to the other party when you're speaking the words. It's the same thing, like you've heard the words, you've heard people talk about email etiquette as an example. If you don't read your email first before you send it and you think that what you said from in your head is going to translate to the other side, you need to read it again because not necessarily is it going to do that. I think that's why emojis were created. The
Yes.
LOL became very popular. It was to get across that, hey, I'm joking over here. I'm laughing. This is funny to me, or I feel really good. And I want you to know this is the emotion I'm conveying with what I'm saying to you. But it's
Yes.
taking the time to really read through your whatever you're trying to send, whether it's a text, whether it's an email, whether it's a voice message. Be sure that you're getting across really what you want to say exactly the way you want it to come across and not what you think is coming across, because again, it can lose the translation when it gets to the other side, because why, we're individual and we all will interpret things differently. It's just the way we're wired, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but making sure that you're mindful of it. It's the same thing in a romantic relationship. If you are in a relationship with somebody and you want them to start doing something more or maybe not, if you go to them saying, stop doing this, you're always doing this, you're yelling at them, automatically they're going to become defensive, right? If you can get into a conversation saying, hey, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about, I understand that you're really super busy, but when you drop your wet towel on the bathroom floor and then I have to come in and pick it up after you, I feel like it's almost like you look at me as being your maid and I feel disrespected. And that could not even really, that could be further from the truth of what they're doing. They might not even be aware that that triggers that in you.
Right.
It's having that conversation. Hey, would you mind, even if you just drape it over the bathtub? That would be a lot nicer than for me to feel like I come in and I feel automatically, my hairs go up in the back of my neck. It's having that conversation. I'm bringing this conversation as an example because my sister-in-law had this very thing that she had to deal with. Her husband would often just leave the towel on the floor, and she never really was able to articulate that it really bothered her. She just
Right.
kept it all in, and I think that has potential to do more harm when you just let it boil, just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Because what
Yeah.
ends up happening usually, something will happen. You'll get into an argument, a huge argument over something else, and um, and it wasn't you, or you might have a conversation about something else, and it wasn't really meant to be an argument. But all of a sudden, you start picking apart all of the other things that are really bothering you that have gotten
Yeah.
to here for you, like your
Yeah.
your last nerve, and they become part of it. So then it escalates, right? you know, so it's really becoming mindful of what you say. It's also timing. Um, Sometimes, again, I'll always bring this up. I really truly believe it's timing for conversations, because if your husband or your wife just walked in the door from work and you can see all over their face they've had a rough day, it's not, I don't think, timing for you to say, hey, we need to talk, because that right there is going to put their wall up. They're going to get defensive, and they're not going to approach that conversation with like, hey, I want to hold space for you. It's just,
Right.
and that's why I say it's so important to understand the level of commitment in that kind of relationship. What are you willing to give? Because it is a give and take, but it really, I always look at it as how much am I willing to give? Because the more I give, the more I get back. And I'm not giving to get back. I'm just giving to just for the sake of giving in the
Right.
relationship. If you can look at it that way, you're going to get back like everything that you probably want and more. But when you're looking at like, if I do this for you, you got to do that for me. You're already putting expectations on the relationship that might not really, really build up a relationship from like from a really good place. So
Right.
I just wanted to share that. And I know it was
Yeah.
a lot because you know me, I like to talk.
Yes, I know you. Yes, I know you like to talk, and I like to listen when you're talking. I like to hear what you're saying. You drop a lot of wisdom in that one. Um, it oftentimes we think we're respecting somebody when we haven't gone through the words that we've said or are about to say. When I know my parents used to say, "Think twice, speak once,"
I love
right?
that.
Um, and it's the same thing as what you were talking about at the beginning, going through your email. Right, like when you're writing something or you're about to text something or you're about to send something, read through it and make sure it says what you wanted to say. One, you'll catch any spelling mistakes, which I have a lot of. But two, you'll also be able to get through, is this really what I wanted to say? Is there any way they could feel disrespected by this? And not just would anybody feel disrespected by this, but if you know the person you're talking to at all, would they specifically find triggers in here? Right? When you're sending a text to your spouse, you'll know their triggers. You'll be more familiar with their triggers. Not all of them, and it's not your responsibility to heal those triggers. But if you know what they are, you can avoid them sometimes. Not all the time. And it's not your responsibility if you don't. But at the same time, don't try and trigger them. Try and be respectful of their triggers. Try and be cognizant and aware of their triggers. So just go through your communications to make sure that you're not intentionally or accidentally triggering something that you didn't mean to trigger. So that that's another version of being respectful is go through the words that you're saying or about to say, and make sure that they sound the way you intend them to be sound, as close as you can get them to, because we can't be great, we can't be perfect about that, but we can do our best to try and communicate as we're trying to communicate. Part of being in a relationship of any flavor is being cognizant, being aware of how that other person might receive what we're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I want to reiterate, not in a general sense, like how would anybody receive this. This is one of the problems that I have with treat people the way you want to be treated. Well, what happens if how you want to be treated isn't the same as how I want to be treated?
Right.
Right? I'd rather you treated me the way I want to be treated. I don't necessarily want to treat you the way I want to be treated. I want to treat you the way you want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's another commitment to that relationship. I don't believe it's enough to treat people how I want to be treated, because what happens if they don't want that? Right? We're not allowing for people to want something different than we want. And so when you're going through your communication, when you're trying to find respect in your words, when you're looking at what's actually happening, look at it from their lens as best you can.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not very good at looking at it from their lens, maybe you learn to do that. Maybe you practice that. Maybe you listen to them more to figure out what their lens looks like. What are their triggers? When you're listening to them, listen to how they speak and what words they use and what emotions they express and how they express them, so that you can learn more about how they communicate, about how they receive communication. And again, depending on your level of commitment, you'll do that more with your life partner, husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever that might be, than you likely will with a coworker from a job you plan on being at for the next 2 years and no more than that. Right? So don't put all that work into a relationship that you don't value very much, but at the same time, put more work into the relationships you value more. So the amount of work is relevant, is related to the strength of your intention from that relationship. And this can improve all of your relationships by just being cognizant, being aware of how your words are being received, and are they being received the way you want them to be? Oftentimes we ignore what they want, and we can only look at it from our point of view. I know one of the biggest things that I help a couple of different clients with is how to see things from other people's point of view, because they only know how to see it from their point of view. Well, this is how I'd want to be treated. Great. They don't want to be treated that way. Right? Can you allow for them to be different than you? Well, everybody's different. Yeah, but can you allow for it? Like, are you okay with that? Right? So this is part of where all this comes from, is it a problem that you're actually and actively disrespecting somebody, or they're actually or actively not respecting you? Or is it a symptom of something deeper, either on your side or on theirs?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's on their side, your responsibility is to recognize it, and it goes nowhere beyond that. You don't get to help them fix it. You don't get to make them fix it. You don't get to insist on them fixing it. You get to decide your level of commitment to the relationship, and that's it. Right?
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. Well, I love, first of all, think twice, speak once. I think that's so important. Just like Judge Judy says, you've got two of these and one of these for a reason. So again, it's like learning to listen before you speak, and
Yeah.
then treat people how they want to be treated. I love that, because again, yeah, I grew up with treat others how you want to be treated, but again, it doesn't necessarily mean that my likes are theirs and vice
Right.
versa. So getting to know someone, it means that you have to know them on a deeper level and get to understand their likes and how, and depending on the level of the relationship and the commitment and what they mean to you. So I truly love that. Thanks for this conversation. We have again made it to the hour. As always, it always seems to be a surprise, but then I don't
Right.
know why. But yeah, we do seem to fill an hour quite easily. But I love this conversation on a lot of levels, because I mean, I know that we could have gone a little bit longer, a little bit deeper. There's some topics that could have gone into, but I think that overall, it's really just becoming aware of these the level of commitment to your relationships
Yeah.
will help you to understand this question of being respected or disrespected and your part in it. Because again, it comes down to yourself. The word self means what you do, you individually. You have no control over what anyone else's actions except your own. And so I love that you brought those two things in. Thank you so much for you coming in and watching us, listening to us as we talked about this discussion. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get back to you, or go into the About section if you want to have a private conversation, and you can email us and we'll get back to you. Andy, thank you again for another amazing conversation. Always love these conversations with you. I think we come to the table not really 100% prepared for these. We just know the topic. We kind of have an idea, and we just start to talk. And I just think magic happens when we just allow it to be an organic flow
Yeah.
conversation. So thank you so much. I truly appreciate you.
Thank you as well. Yeah, same back at you. Ditto. I love these conversations. The wisdom that comes out when you and I get in conversation together is just, it's outstanding. I just love it. Um, and again, thank you, audience, for sharing with us, for joining us, for enjoying this conversation. Um, and please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you get notifications of when we're going live, which currently is every Saturday morning. Um, if you're in the North America, um, and like the video. Apparently, YouTube notices when people like it and therefore sends it out to more people based on how many likes we get. So please like the video, help it get around to more people. Comments also help with that, but also we really want to know how you think, what you think, what you thought of the topic, what your views are on the topic, and we want to know if there's anything that you want to add, or if there's another topic that maybe you want to talk about. We want to know those things. So yeah, like, share, comment. Um, you know, let us know what we can do, and we appreciate your time and effort in listening and joining into these conversations and hearing what we have to say on the subject. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a great weekend, and we can see you next time.
Yeah. Have a great rest of your weekend and a great week. We'll see you next Saturday. Bye for now.
Thank you, everybody. Bye bye, everybody.